Good morning, everyone. I'm Ryan, this is Cara, and this is Bluebird Homestead.
Today we're going to be putting in a water hydrant and doing phase 1 of our drip irrigation system for the garden.
So we're going to bring the water line for the garden from the basement. So I'm digging along that house here to get below the frost line, and then we will start with the trencher here and go to the garden.
There's a lot of rock next to the house from the backfill, so I'm glad Ryan is the one shoveling that out today.
So we rented a trencher for the day. I've never used one of these, but they should make pretty good work of installing a water line. This is a Ditch Witch C24X. It's a 36-inch digging depth, and it's about 30 foot wide. So that's something to keep in mind if you're trying to get into tight places.
Last spring we buried our downspouts, so Ryan is hand shoveling around that. And thankfully we have my dad here today to help get this job done because there is several hundred feet here that need to be trenched. This trencher does seem to be making a pretty quick job of it though. I definitely wouldn't want to be shoveling all of this by hand. I shoveled most of the areas by hand earlier in the week around the garden beds, just because I didn't think the trencher would fit between all the garden beds, and that was a job in and of itself. So I am glad for modern machinery, that's for sure. And helpers to help out. Ryan used a concrete hammer drill to punch a hole through our basement wall to feed the pipe through. The pipe we're using is 3/4 inch PEX pipe. He actually decided to feed it through the outside instead of through the inside because there was a lot more footage that was going to be outside the basement than inside. As you can see, we have it lined up here next to the trench now so that it's run all the way to the garden. All we gotta do is plop it in. We're burying the PEX pipe the full depth that this trencher will dig. It's probably a little bit overkill for our area. It definitely doesn't get that hard of a ground freeze most of the time. We're also installing a shutoff valve in the basement for this hydrant. We also plan on tapping into this line that we've already buried for any future hydrants we install as well. The boys have gotten the pipe all laid out in the trench, and Ryan's just going to use the tractor to quickly cover it all back up. We feel comfortable going ahead and burying this pipe because there's no connections or fittings. It's just one straight run piece of pipe the whole way. We are going to be leaving the parts right next to the house and where the actual hydrant is going to be installed unburied for the moment. I need to go out and buy some sealant so that we can seal around that pipe outside the basement wall before we cover it up. This is a pretty deep trench, so we just wanted to make sure that no one twisted an ankle or ran into it, especially with kids running around. And dogs for that matter too, because Lucy here is pretty clumsy. We're going to be using a Woodford yard hydrant with a 3-foot bury depth. The depth that you want to get your hydrant is all dependent on where your frost line is. I forgot to film it before he covered it up, but Ryan attached the hydrant to the PEX line with a brass 3/4 inch PEX to water hydrant fitting, and he used a 5-gallon bucket with the bottom cut off to fill with some gravel and concrete mix just to make everything really nice and stable. And now he's just using some supports zip tied onto the hydrant just to keep things level and keep the hydrant from wiggling around while that concrete sets up. Earlier this week, the kids and I dug all the trenches from each of the raised beds around the garden. We did them maybe 6 inches deep. Ryan's making them a little deeper in some spots. And this is where we're going to be actually running the drip irrigation to each bed. We have 3/4 inch PEX pipe from the basement to the water hydrant, and then from the water hydrant buried underground to each individual bed, we are doing 1/2 inch PEX pipe. We just necked down the pipe size to hopefully add a little bit of extra water pressure, and it's a little bit cheaper too. I'll leave Amazon links in the description box below to all of the fittings and different products we were using today. The exact amounts of pipe you would need and the fittings will vary depending on your garden layout. The gist of it is that you basically cut the pipe where you need it to be, and then we're using poly crimp PEX fittings and stainless steel PEX cinch clamp rings. That's a mouthful. We are teeing off at every bed and threading a piece of pipe up through the bed so that we can install an individual shutoff valve in each one of the bed corners. And to this shutoff valve, this is where we will actually install the drip irrigation on top of the soil. That'll be in a future video, so subscribe and stay tuned for that.
We're just using these 1/2-inch EMT straps. They fit pretty well over the 1/2-inch PEX. It's a little larger than 1/2-inch, but it will do the job for sure.
Good job.
I've got the drone up in the air so I can show you guys the whole layout of the garden now. As you can see, we avoided filling the new beds because we wanted to wait for this PEX to be installed before we did that, so that'll be coming in a future video as well. The PEX is run to each individual bed, and we actually did 2 shutoff valves in the large L-shaped beds, so we have a total of 30 shutoff valves. Our garden is divided into 2 zones, and we will be running an automatic timer from the hydrant to each of the zones. And we'll go into more details about the zoning and the drip irrigation on the top of the beds when we do that video in a week or 2. The garden is pretty much all done for the PEX side of things, which is the underground portion of this drip irrigation system. One note, PEX is not UV rated, so we are going to be burying all of this blue PEX line. We're burying it about 6 inches below the soil, which we do plan on draining it each winter before frost. So we weren't intending it to be fully frost protected. The main line from the house is buried well below the frost line, so we don't have to worry about that one. But the PEX, we're burying it just a few inches below to protect it from the UV rating and also just from general wear and tear of us walking all over the place.
Just got finished testing the PEX lines and all the fittings, making sure we didn't have any leaks, so we're good to go. We're going to cover everything up now. We're going to have a future video where we put the drip irrigation on top of the beds after we get some soil in.
Yep.
Oh my goodness.